The whispers in the small town never stopped. She can't have children, they said, as though her worth was tied to a cradle she couldn't fill. Amelia had grown up under the crushing weight of that label, infertile, stamped on her soul by doctors and repeated like a cruel mantra by her own family. When her cousins planned a cruel joke, sending her off to the old rancher's farm as a mock bride, they didn't expect her to accept. But Amelia did. She carried her silence and pain with her, hoping at least the vast fields and horses would drown out the noise of her shame. The rancher, Samuel, was a man hardened by the sun and softened by loss. Widowed, young and childless, he had built walls around his heart higher than the wooden fences of his cattle ranch. When Amelia arrived, awkward and fragile, he assumed she wouldn't last a week in the dust and labor. Yet something in her eyes, a quiet determination, or maybe an exhaustion that came from too much hurt, made him keep her there. "You can stay, if you're willing to work," he told her, and she nodded, grateful for the first place that asked her only for effort, not perfection. Life on the ranch was nothing like the delicate rooms of her family's estate. Every morning before dawn, Amelia rose to the crowing roosters, pulling on boots 2 sizes too big and stumbling to the stables. Her hands blistered from ropes, her skin burned under the sun, and her muscles screamed at the unfamiliar work. Yet with every task, she felt herself loosening the chains of her past. Samuel watched her fall and rise again, never complaining, and for the first time in years, he felt something stir in his chest, a fragile respect for the woman who'd been cast aside. The days stretched into weeks, and slowly, Samuel's quiet ranch became less of a prison and more of a sanctuary. He began to notice the little things: how Amelia laughed with the horses, how her eyes softened when she fed the lambs, how she hummed songs to herself while hanging laundry under the wide sky. They never spoke of her family, nor of his past grief, but an unspoken bond formed. 2 broken souls, both told life had denied them something vital, found a strange comfort in working side by side. Silence wasn't loneliness anymore, it was peace. Still, nights brought back Amelia's fears. She'd lie awake under the thin blankets, staring at the ceiling, hearing her mother's voice echo, "You are a failure, Amelia. No man will ever want you." Tears often dampened her pillow, but in the morning, she'd rise and face the land. Samuel, noticing the fatigue in her eyes, began leaving little kindnesses: an extra apple by her plate, a softer blanket folded on her bed. He never mentioned them, but Amelia noticed. For the first time, she felt seen, not for what she lacked, but for who she was. One stormy night changed everything. A knock at the ranch door startled them both, and when Samuel opened it, he found a young woman collapsed, clutching a tiny, crying baby. The girl was fleeing an abusive husband, desperate for shelter. Samuel and Amelia brought her inside, warmed her by the fire, and gave her food. But by dawn, the woman was gone, leaving only a note on the table: "Please care for my child. I cannot." Amelia's heart ached as she lifted the swaddled infant into her arms, the little one quieting as if he'd found safety. Samuel stared at Amelia holding the baby, something powerful flashing across his face. For years, he had thought his home would remain empty, echoing with silence. Now, watching Amelia cradle the abandoned child, he felt his heart cracking open. But doubt still lingered. Could they, 2 people discarded by life, raise this child together? Amelia, however, didn't hesitate. She kissed the baby's forehead, whispering, "You're safe now. I'll be your mother." For the first time, the word, mother, didn't feel like a cruel impossibility, it felt like destiny. Days turned into months, and the ranch echoed with new sounds: tiny laughter, small cries, the soft lullabies Amelia sang under the stars. She poured her love into the child, never once thinking of biology, only of belonging. Samuel, though cautious, found himself drawn into the rhythm too, rocking the baby to sleep, carving a tiny wooden horse as a toy, laughing when little fingers clutched his beard. The house, once silent, now breathed life again. And Amelia, once called barren, was living the deepest truth of motherhood: love, not blood, makes a parent. Of course, word spread quickly. The town gossips wagged their tongues, spinning wild stories about the mysterious child. Amelia's family, hearing rumors, came storming to the ranch one afternoon, demanding answers. Her mother's voice was sharp, slicing through the air: "You steal another woman's child to hide your shame. You disgrace us further, Amelia." Old wounds reopened, but Amelia stood tall this time. She held the baby close, her voice steady. I am not hiding anything. This child is mine, because I chose him. You can't shame me anymore. Samuel stepped beside her then, his presence strong and protective. For years, Amelia had fought her battles alone, but now, she wasn't alone anymore. She's more of a mother than any of you ever were, Samuel said, his voice hard as stone. This child has a home here. And Amelia has a home here. You'll not take either from me. The family, stunned by his defiance and Amelia's newfound strength, left in a cloud of anger and embarrassment. For the first time, Amelia felt free, not because they accepted her, but because she no longer needed them to. Seasons shifted, and the ranch blossomed alongside its unusual family. The baby grew stronger, learning to toddle among the sunflowers and chase the chickens, laughter ringing across the land. Amelia discovered a strength she never knew she had, balancing ranch work, childcare, and her own healing. Samuel softened too, his once hardened heart opening fully to the joy of belonging. They never labeled themselves as parents out of obligation, but rather as people who had chosen to love fiercely, despite the world's judgment. There were hard days too. Nights when the baby cried endlessly, when bills piled high, when exhaustion tested their patience. But through it all, Samuel and Amelia leaned on each other. Where one faltered, the other carried the weight. Where one doubted, the other reminded them of hope. Slowly, their home became more than just shelter, it became proof that broken things can be mended, that even in loss, life plants new seeds of love and purpose. Amelia began to smile more, her laughter echoing with the kind of freedom she had once thought impossible. On the baby's first birthday, Samuel surprised Amelia with something she'd never dared to dream of. He gathered the townsfolk, setting a table under the wide open sky, and raised his glass. Today, we don't just celebrate the child who brought light back into this home, he said, eyes lingering on Amelia, but the woman who gave us a family. Amelia is no one's shame, she is our strength. The townspeople, once skeptical, cheered with genuine warmth, and Amelia's eyes filled with tears. For once, she wasn't hiding in shadows, she was celebrated. That night, under the stars, Samuel finally spoke the words he had been holding back. You've given me more than I ever thought I'd have, he whispered, his rough hand finding hers. Amelia, holding the sleeping child in her arms, smiled softly. And you've given me a place where I belong. In that quiet moment, love bloomed, not rushed, not forced, but steady, like the land they worked together. A love born not of perfection, but of survival, healing, and choosing each other every day. Years passed, and the little boy grew tall and strong, his laughter still filling the ranch. Amelia's once fragile spirit had become unshakable. She no longer cared for whispers or cruel jokes. She had built a life of meaning, one born not from society's approval but from her own courage to embrace love in unexpected places. The ranch had become a sanctuary, not just for her, Samuel, and the boy, but for every soul who visited and found a reminder that family is not defined by bloodlines but by hearts willing to stay. Her family, still bitter, rarely visited. But Amelia no longer longed for their acceptance. She realized that sometimes, the families we are born into cannot see our worth, but that doesn't mean we have none. The family she had now, Samuel and her child, saw her not as broken but as whole. And that truth mattered more than all the old wounds combined. She had transformed her pain into love, her shame into pride, her emptiness into abundance. She was living proof that destiny can write its own script. When the boy was old enough to understand, Amelia told him the story of how he came into their lives. She spoke not with sorrow, but with gratitude, teaching him that love is the truest form of inheritance. Samuel added stories too, of how the ranch was once silent but was reborn with his laughter. The child grew up knowing he was not abandoned but chosen, cherished beyond measure. In every lesson, Amelia hoped he would carry forward the truth that had saved her. Love makes a family, not blood. The town, once cruel, came to respect Amelia. They saw her courage, her devotion, and her strength in rebuilding a life others tried to destroy. Where they once saw shame, they now saw inspiration. Mothers brought their children to play at the ranch, men tipped their hats to Samuel, and women confided in Amelia about their own hidden struggles. She became a beacon, showing others that scars don't define us, they remind us of battles we've overcome. One evening, years later, Amelia walked the ranch fields, watching her son ride on Samuel's shoulders, both laughing under the golden sunset. She felt a swell of gratitude so deep it brought tears to her eyes. The girl once mocked, discarded, and broken now stood surrounded by the family she had always dreamed of. She whispered to the wind, "I was never barren. My love has always been fertile." And in that moment, she knew she had finally come home. The story of Amelia, the rancher, and the child lived on in the town's memory. It was told not as a tale of shame, but as one of resilience and redemption. They proved that love could bloom even from the cruelest beginnings, that families could be built from choice and courage. Amelia's life became a testament. You cannot define someone by what they lack, only by the love they give. And so, the once infertile daughter was remembered not for what she couldn't do, but for the family she created against all odds.